Recording. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 8 of NASEP. We are going to be finishing out these last couple of days of the summer session and are excited to be looking forward to the rest of this academic year with you all. But again, good job for everything that you've done thus far, and we're excited for the next couple of presentations that we're going to be having with you all today. For this morning, we have our morning check-ins, and then our first session will be the possibilities for Native peoples in academia and STEM, which is going to be facilitated and presented by Dr. Michael Charles. And so we had an article from the ACES website that we had you all read about Dr. Michael Charles assigned for yesterday's assignment. So a couple updates. I think that article may have been a couple years old when he was still doing his doctoral studies, but he's a recent and newly minted doctor. He defended his doctoral thesis a couple weeks ago, might have been even like last week. So that's really exciting. And so he'll be joining us at 9:30, and then we'll have our second session, which will be the water quality or the air quality session. And we'll be using those paper plates and those air quality sensors that you all created on Monday. And then afterwards, we'll do our reflection and debrief. So a couple reminders, make sure that your parents are signed up for Slack. We have everyone signed up for Slack who are participants now. So just trying to get those parents on so that they're connected. In addition, make sure you're sending us a photo of yourself. If for some reason this box link is not working for you, you can always just text it directly to me and I can upload it. And of course, we have the Nike Run Club Challenge, which I'm sure a lot of you have already put in some distance and miles because we see it on the app. I just want to point out, I know that Tunisha mentioned that she does like basketball tournaments. So I invite you, Tunisha, if for the time that you have been doing your basketball events, to also include that as well. We can convert those into miles. We did that for Caitlin's, for yesterday. And so we can do that for anybody else because there are other ways to be active other than just running and walking, and we want to support you in that. We will be using Kahoot for the air quality presentation. And so if you had issues yesterday, try to figure that out this morning so that there aren't any issues. If you need to be with me in the main room during the breakout sessions this morning, then by all means, let me know. We want to make sure that that's situated so that you're fully engaged and are able to participate with the Kahoot activity. In addition to sign up for the ACES membership. So this is what some of our slides will look like for our recognition of you that's going to be happening on Friday. And so we'll have a photo, either one that you submitted with you and your family or one that's by yourself. So this is why we're asking you all to include a photo of yourself, because otherwise it'll have your team name here. So if you're part of Blue Twisted Minds, Swag Kids, Lab Rats, the photo that we have designated for your group will be the placeholder because we didn't receive a photo for you. And so it looks much nicer to have you represented there rather than your group logo. Even though I made the group logos and think that they look great, I would much rather have you all in that photo instead. And then we'll also include some information that you submitted, including like where you go to high school, what your interests are, and things that we've learned about you throughout the sessions that we have in the morning. And so again, just a couple reminders: be respectful, be on time, be engaged, communicate with us, and have your video on. And then this morning, we do have a couple of our, sorry, Caitlin, you can't hear what I'm saying. If you're able to log off and log back on, maybe that will help. Is anyone having any other audio issues? Can everybody else hear me? Okay. So yeah, maybe try logging off and logging back on. And then if that doesn't help, there's that call in that you can do on your phone. So just try that and then send me a message if you're still having those issues. Okay, so this morning, we are sending our thoughts to Natalia's cat and good energy to Natalia's cat. Unfortunately, he was bit by a rattlesnake yesterday and is going through treatment for that. He's pulled through, which is great. So hopefully that's the worst of it. But she's picking him up from the vet, so she's not here this morning. So I think for today, if it's fine with Kiara, of course, because I know she likes to have her group cheer, we could just do a big group cheer and then get started with our breakout sessions. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's fine to me.
All right, so if we can start to unmute ourselves and we're just gonna do a big good morning. We'll do that instead of howling. See folks unmuting. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, good to hear everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. So for our morning check-ins today, if you can change your first name, no, not change your first name, sorry. Have it to be your first name and then your favorite musical artist or song. So if you vibe with a particular song, it's on repeat, put that one down. Your favorite artist, put that down. And in support of that, I forgot to share this earlier with you all, but I created a Spotify playlist that's collaborative, so people can add their favorite tunes into it. And so it'll be a nice NASEP playlist to hear all the different things that people like to listen to. So maybe when you're doing your wellness workouts and putting your steps in, you can listen to the playlist. I'm gonna get that opened right now so that I can send it to you to start adding things. And so not Natalia, sorry, Kiara, if you can help me out as I do this to see a couple of things that are changing on the screen with what people are including. And then for folks, once you complete it, if you could just put good morning or do your weather report in the chat. Copy link to playlist. So Corneliuson, good morning. Yep, good morning. Lex J. Cole, Jaron Drake, good morning. Here's the link so you can put some Drake and J. Cole into the playlist. All right. Kiara, can you help me out by reading what's in the chat and what some of the students' favorite artists are?
Yeah, so let's see. Corneliuson likes J. Cole, Jaren likes Drake, Antonio likes Kid. I don't know how to say it. Not into rap, sorry.
Kid Cudi, is that what it was? Let me see. I'm trying to go back to see. It's yeah, Kid Cudi. You know who Kid Cudi is?
No.
Oh,
Rap is not my forte.
not just rap, he is a visionary. Just kidding.
Oh, that's is kind of just all over the place.
Go ahead, keep reading. Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. Autumn likes Eve, Kayla likes Drake, Cole likes Mac Miller, Michaela likes Mac Miller, Zeta likes Beach House, Mateo hasn't changed his name yet, Azure likes Kendrick Lamar, Addie likes J. Cole, Yanaba likes J. Cole, Hannah likes Kojo. I'm just gonna assume. All right, Natasha likes J. Cole, and Taylor likes Mitski. Is that it?
Is that it? Okay, I was gonna do the pair people with their exit buddies, but I'm trying to open this list and it might be taking a little bit of a time. So I'm just gonna do it random. I'm gonna put people in pairs. If you need help with Kahoot, also put that in the chat so that I don't put you into a breakout room so that I can just keep you in the main room so I can help you out. So let me know in the chat. I think Twanisha was having issues yesterday and maybe Azure, but if you figured that out, please update me. And so I'm gonna just be doing random bless you. I just see you on the screen sneezing, Hannah, but I'm gonna just randomly create these breakout rooms. And so what's going to be happening in the breakout room is, of course, talking topic, why you chose that specific music, and why you like that person, or that specific song. You can also just get an update from this person or get to know them if you don't know them quite as much already. And then also, if you run out of things to talk about, you do have these Shishibo cubes. And so the speed test that Rudy was talking about is you basically race the person. So when it's in a cube, you have your cube, and then you're racing to turn it into that circle looking contraption. Let me see. See, I'm not very fast at this, but you turn it into this shape, and then you're going to turn around and put it back into the cube. Oh my gosh. So yeah, you're going to turn it back into a cube. So different options for what you can do in your breakout rooms today. I don't know if we're missing somebody, but Kiara, you're going into a breakout room, just so you know. So, and then let me check the chat. Twanisha, did you still need help with Kahoot?
Yeah.
You did? Okay, I'm gonna take you out of the breakout room. All right. And then Azure, did you need help with Kahoot?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. So I'm opening the breakout rooms. Again, you can be doing talking, getting an update, or doing the race. Opening them now. To you all students. So without further ado, here is Dr. Michael Charles. You have the floor.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carol. So I guess I'll just start by introducing myself. Yate, She'e Michael Charles Yineshe, Bilagana Nishle, Shihi Bashishchin, Bilagana Dashishche, Nakai Deshanali. So hello, everyone. I'm Dene. My family comes from the Ganado area, and a lot of my family also still now lives in, or has moved to the Kayenta area, so Monument Valley. I currently live out in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. I just defended my thesis, as was mentioned last week, and I'm at The Ohio State University. They really love to be obnoxious about including the in there. And so I guess I'll start by talking about the name that I added. I listen to a lot of music, and the Scary Pockets is just a band I've been listening to a lot recently. They're basically just a cover funk band, and pretty much most artists that you guys have put down as your favorites, they've probably done covers by songs like them, and they just do it in a very funky style. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Can everyone see that? No? Okay. Let's see. Let me try again. Let's see, share screen. Any luck now? Good to go? All right.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. And I'm just trying to figure out how to still see everyone's faces. Okay, I think I've got it down. So I'm going to kind of just talk broadly today. It's meant to be kind of an open conversation, and whatever best feels like you guys want to ask questions about or engage in. So I'm not too tied to a formal presentation, but I just have some slides to kind of help us keep moving. So I titled it The Possibilities for Native Peoples in Academia and STEM. And really what I want to talk about most today is around all the different opportunities we do have as Native people, and different perspectives that we bring to academia. And just the idea of, I think we've all been kind of told time and time again that kind of college or universities weren't made for us. And so a lot of times there's a lot of tension between going to school as a Native people and the way it can take you from home and from family, but also just kind of wanted to celebrate all the different things that we can bring to different colleges, universities, whatever that is. So I'm just going to kind of start by talking a little bit about myself. I did introduce that I'm from the Ganado area. I was actually born in Chandler. So anyone who's been following the Phoenix Suns, I'm a big Phoenix Suns fan. There we go. I see the shirt. And yeah, so I actually was just back in Phoenix a couple of weeks ago and was excited because I got to go stop by the stadium again. And that's something my family has kind of always loved basketball. I went to high school. Actually, we moved up to Colorado when I was in around late grade school. And so I went to high school in Longmont, Colorado, and had a class of 18 people that I graduated with. So pretty small school. From there, I moved to New York. I went to Cornell and did a degree in chemical engineering and did a minor in music. Then I did my graduate school, as I mentioned, I've been doing here at Ohio State. And yeah, so here's actually pictures from the top left is out in Ganado. That's at my grandma's house. And then there's a picture with one of my cousins sleeping when I was a kid. And so that's kind of where I'm from. And then the bottom left is actually the mountains in Colorado. And that's kind of more recent photo of some work I was doing actually abroad, working with indigenous peoples and climate change. And so just other, I guess, things about me. I kind of shared a little bit about the music background, but I also, I love jazz music. It's a weird thing that we don't see too often in this day and age, but that's what I did my degree in. I did a minor in playing jazz. I play the bass, the upright bass, the big one. Sports, I've always played a lot of sports. I was able to play football through college, and I still play rugby right now and get to kind of travel all over playing rugby. I really enjoy traveling. That's something that I try to kind of make time for. And one thing I've really enjoyed about being in academia is the flexibility in schedules so that I can kind of do some of those trips. And I love food. I love trying all sorts of food. I think if I had to say what my favorite food is, I would go with probably sushi is my favorite. Not a popular thing from the Southwest usually, but it's probably one of the things that I've learned to really enjoy. And so one thing I did want to kind of start with is the idea that never have I taken a college STEM class with another Indigenous student. Through all the schools I was at, I've always been kind of the only Native student there. And so this is actually something that I remember from pulling up when I was an undergrad, and this was their diversity report at the College of Engineering. And I thought it was interesting, if you look in the American Indian column, that first one there's like very few people that can point out exactly kind of where they're from or who they are on a spreadsheet like that. And it's, I mean, it's pretty much within the American Indian and within the Black columns that you can even point out one person. So I thought it was interesting that out of a whole spreadsheet, I could find exactly who I was. And it kind of shows a lot of the work that we have to do in terms of representation of Native people in higher education. But I actually did want to start by just kind of watching a video. This is actually a TED Talk done by a high school sophomore. So a young person who does talk about just kind of that same experience of what I'm saying around why we really need to see an increased representation and why it should matter to people outside of just Native students and Native people. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. Let me know, give me a thumbs up if you can hear it when I start it. I think I shared my. Good to go? All right. We'll just go ahead and watch it. It's a little long, but then we'll play a game after that and try to.
My name is Madeline Gupta. I'd like to start.
Oh, whoops. I don't think I can mute myself and do that. All right. Let's see.
Asking you all to take out your cell phones. There's a link behind me. Go ahead and type it into a web browser. The link will take you to a page with 2 questions on it. Go ahead and answer them. The first question asks you to imagine a room of 100 randomly selected kindergartners in the United States. 100 kindergartners with varying genders, ethnicities, and backgrounds. Out of those 100, how many would you expect to obtain a bachelor's degree? The following question asks you to examine Indigenous youth.
I'm going to go ahead and add this setting that Carol just mentioned. How do I do that? Is it video settings?
Yeah, so you're going to go to video settings, and then when you scroll down a little bit, it should say optimize for thumbnail or something like that. Do you see it?
Let's see.
I usually find it when I'm screen sharing and I put my cursor all the way to the top, and then it puts the options. You view the options, and then it should.
Okay, let me just stop sharing and reshare, and then because I remember where that option is when I do that. Okay. Let's try that again. Okay. Okay, can people still see that? I now can't see anyone's.
We can still see it, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
And I'll let you know if it comes up a little bit better.
Okay. Well, of course, it now doesn't want to play. Let's see.
Question asks you to examine Indigenous youth. What if that room was filled with 100 kindergartners that were all Native American? How many would you expect to graduate then? 112 members of the community responded to the same 2 questions. Their predictions for the first question are projected behind me. Most respondents believed that around 50 of these 100 randomly selected kindergartners would graduate college. According to Sandia National Laboratories, however, only 33 of these kindergartners would in truth graduate college and obtain a bachelor's degree. While that is surprising, this is unfortunately only the beginning. Let's take a look at how members around the community responded to the second question. Most people responded that around 45 to 50 of these Native American kindergartners would go on to graduate with a bachelor's degree. However, the real number is lower than 40. The real number is lower than 30, lower than 20, lower than 15. The true value is even lower than 10. That's correct. The percentage of Indigenous youth who are expected to graduate with a bachelor's degree isn't even in the double digits. Out of a group of 100 Native American kindergartners, only 7 would be expected to graduate and obtain a bachelor's degree. Even more pressing, out of those 7 who will have the opportunity to graduate, only 2 of them are expected to go on to science or math. When it comes to STEM education, Native Americans are continually being left out of the conversation. The few natives in STEM become obvious even when looking at my own experiences. I have grown up in neighborhoods where strong education in science and math is available to me. This isn't the case for the majority of people of my ethnicity, though. In 11 years of going to school, I have never been in a class where there are other Indigenous people. This means that in every math and science class I've attended since kindergarten, I have been the only person of my race in the room. Why now, in the 21st century, are Native Americans still being denied equal career aspirations? Let's take a look at 3 of the main causes. Number 1, the implications of historical and intergenerational trauma. The historical trauma theory states that preceding cultural trauma has a distinct effect on current culture. This means that despite gaining so-called equality in Western society, Native Americans struggle to gain the same advantages, most critically in STEM education, as others have had for centuries. The continued historical restriction of our people has set us back hundreds of years in the journey to science and mathematics. Poverty and limited resources are often examined as causes of this disparity, but the underlying issue, historical trauma, is seldom considered or addressed. Despite this, it remains one of, if not the most important, aggressive factor. Consistently throughout the past, Native people have been denied access to the same education as our counterparts of other backgrounds. In 1865, President Ulysses S. Grant advocated for the removal of all Native children from their homes and families. He went on to recommend that these displaced children be enrolled in government-run boarding schools, where they would be forcibly assimilated into white culture. Indian assimilation schools wrongly convinced many Native youth, at least the ones who survived them, that being Indigenous was a shameful thing. It is only very recently that Native people have been recognized and allowed to pursue a range of careers. Despite this recent improvement in status, the violence and brutality of history continues to affect Indigenous success today. Due to education being used as a weapon against Indigenous people by the American school system of the past, today's generations of Native students are put at a disadvantage in the classroom. Higher degrees still remain out of reach. This brings us to our second cause, a current educational and economic disparity. Even in today's schools, there is little to no cultural relevance for Native American students. Curriculum in the classrooms of America continues to focus on white Anglo-Saxon history, glossing over the events of Native people. The limited representation of their past and present while in school damages the educational experience of Native students. Indigenous children are unable to see positive role models of their ethnicity while in school. Because of this, they grow up disconnected from predominantly Western fields, such as science or mathematics. The continued historical restriction of Indigenous people has also prevented them from accumulating the same levels of wealth as other groups. As a result, many are in poverty and unable to access the necessary resources to achieve a STEM career. Even in the rare circumstances where Native children can go on to science or math, more setbacks present themselves within the workplace, bringing us to our third cause: discrimination while at work. In Western America, there are more STEM careers than any other type of job. Part of the reason why Native Americans do not hold an appropriate proportion of these jobs has nothing to do with them personally. Instead, it has everything to do with the color of their skin. As recently as one lifetime ago, discrimination against Indigenous people was legal. Even more frightening, it was socially accepted. It is the 21st century, and we are still being sorted by the makeup of our genetics over the composition of our souls. Take a look at the story of Howie Echo Hawk, as reported by NPR. Echo Hawk, a member of Oklahoma's Pawnee Nation, formerly wore his hair in a mohawk, as is the culture and tradition of his tribe. After he was told by a job manager to, quote, get a respectable haircut, Echo Hawk cut his hair into a Western style. When he had to take time off of work for an injury, he was verbally discriminated against by another manager who complained that this is what happened when Native Americans were allowed in his workplace. Echo Hawk's story is not unique. Indigenous people around the country face racism at their workplaces every day. According to NPR, over 1/4 of all Native people believe that they are discriminated against when applying for a job because of their ethnicity. STEM jobs, which are among the highest paying and most successful, are particularly guilty of this. STEM graduates of Native ethnicity who are qualified for a job are liable to be turned down because of his or her cultural background. This is blatantly unfair. Nevertheless, the necessity of STEM fields in Native communities is only becoming higher. The University of Montana recently implemented a program to attempt to address this lack of representation. Dr. Aaron Thomas traveled to several tribal grounds in Montana and created an action plan based on the requests of tribal personnel and students. The result? A summer institute for students on the Blackfeet and Fort Belknap reservations. Students on the reservations were able to get hands-on experience with science and gain new exposure to the subject. 100% of the children involved said that they valued this experience highly. Programs such as the one put into action by Dr. Thomas foster early interest in STEM by children on reservations. This interest is then able to grow and flourish as students get older, making it more likely they will have the ability to choose a career in STEM later on. In spite of the fact that history has denied previous generations of Native Americans from achieving their hopes and dreams of their future in the same way that their white peers have been able to, developments such as the one by Dr. Thomas work to reduce the gap in advantage and level the playing field. Although this is a destructive and pervasive issue, it is not one that is unsolvable. Together, we can work as a collective force to undo what centuries of trauma and oppression has left in its wake. You don't have to pioneer a huge project to make a difference, though. Members of the community, whether Native or not, can help reduce this gap in several small ways. One way is by advocating for local Native men and women in your community. By supporting anti-discrimination efforts, you are helping increase the chance that the Native children of the future will be able to go into predominantly Western fields, such as science or mathematics. At the beginning of my talk, I asked you all to fill out a short survey on your phone. Raise your hand if your prediction for the number of Native students who would obtain a bachelor's degree was close to the actual answer. The fact that so many audience members were unaware of this disparity shows how overlooked Native issues are. Although the lack of Native representation in science is a serious issue, it is seldom regarded as such. Working to change that will not be easy, but it is of utmost necessity that we do. Although we are set years back in the opportunities that have been afforded to us, self-determined Native men and women continue to fight for their rights and for their power to build successful futures for themselves. Being a Native American in science often feels like a game where everyone else has been given a head start. No matter the work and time put in, some have an advantage because history has handed it to them. As an Ojibwe woman in a world where Native Americans are continually overlooked when it comes to STEM, I have to fight every day to receive the same opportunities as my peers. This is blatantly unfair. Native voices need to be heard in the conversation concerning STEM. No longer will we stand for being pushed out or interrupted by the voices of those who wish to silence us. We will be heard because we deserve to be heard. Thank you.
All right. Well, now I can't see everyone, so I don't know how to go back to that. But I'm just going to go back and rechange how I was sharing. So I guess before I go back to sharing my screen, does anyone have any initial thoughts to that video? And feel free to put it in the chat or go ahead and unmute and speak if you'd like to. Anyone?
I thought I saw someone going for the unmute button. Let's see. And I have Michaela McMiller share what her thoughts are.
Sorry, I turned off my camera. My audio just doesn't connect well when I turn off my camera. But I thought that was very impacting and very eye-opening. I enjoyed how she talked about the history, the way she brought up how a lot of Native American students don't get as many opportunities as any other ethnicity. I also enjoyed her talking about her experiences, kind of like relating it to kind of like what she's been through. I know that there's with our school, there's only like one Navajo class, as there's like no Navajo crafting class and all that. So like how she talked about, there's little to no classes like that's relevant to Native Americans. And then she said that like how our education is not as equal as others. So I enjoyed the video.
Thanks, Michaela. Can you call on somebody else?
Natasha?
I agree, Michaela. It was very eye-opening. I was really shocked that it was only 7 expected to get a bachelor's degree. I think that's very, very low. And it was even more surprising that too, only going to the STEM field. So yeah, it was just very shocking to me. And yeah.
You call on one more person, Natasha?
Kayla?
Did she say me or Kale?
Kayla.
So me?
Yeah.
Okay. I say the same thing Michaela said. I really enjoyed the video and how she was just talking about the history and stuff like that. So yeah.
Thank you. Did anyone not like the video? Did it make them feel all somehow? Made me feel kind of bad in the beginning, right? Did it make anyone feel kind of like, oh, this is kind of sad? Yeah, I see some head nods. Yep. And then later it switched to something more more hopeful, I hope, right? About what can be done and advocating for people to be allied with us in that way. So I think there's different feelings that can go on when watching that video, definitely. So thank you for the folks who shared out.
Yeah, thank you for everyone's input. I kind of do that. I showed that not just to focus on the beginning, but as Carol mentioned, it starts to become more of an uplifting thing at the end of what can we do, and really focuses a bit on the pride of how we have been advocating and for ourselves as Native people, and that's a space that we can keep growing and keep pushing forward. And so what we're gonna do next, I actually have just put together a little one of the Kahoot games that's gonna be, it's gonna be half random trivia questions and half some of these updated statistics. So there is some things that have actually improved since this video. And so we'll make sure we include that. And these are all from, I think, a 2019 report in terms of the statistics. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that started. Let's see. So if you're not familiar with this yet, there will be a way to play on your phone or online, but I think you can just put in a URL and use a game pin. So let me now share the screen again.
Great. And something I just wanted to also input, Michael, too, is like just pointing out things that are issues sometimes is uncomfortable, but in order to address issues, you have to name the elephant in the room, right? So
Right.
I think that video did a great job of naming the elephant so that solutions can be brought forth. Is anyone having issues with Kahoot today that needs help? No, we seem to resolve the issues from yesterday. That's good.
Is that everyone? Are we getting there?
We should have at least 24. Unless the team leads entered, I entered. So we should have a little bit over 24. If it dropped down, maybe somebody's internet disconnected, but I'll go ahead and put the in the chat in case anyone adds a little bit later so that we can get started. 8:32, 9631. And I forgot, I think someone had called in. So if you did call in, you can go to www.kahoot.it. That's the browser. And then the game pin is 8329631. I'll put those links and the pin in chat Slack in case you need it. But I think we're good to start.
Perfect. We'll go ahead and get started. So like I said, it's going to be mixed in with completely random trivia and then some other things to think about based on the video. And I will admit that those numbers have now increased. So that's your first hint. We'll go ahead and get started. So the first one is, what's the hardest rock? All right, 15 got it right. The answer is diamond, in case anyone can't see. All right, moving to the next question. So this is, what is the percentage of 18 to 24-year-old students enrolled in college in the US? So this is all students. All right, we had 10 right with that. So there's 41% of 18 to 24-year-old students enrolled in college in the US. So about half. And we have KO in the lead. All right, we're on to question 3. How many hearts does an octopus have? $13 with 3. Now we have Hannah with the highest answer streak of 3. Going on to question 4. Now we're looking at what percentage of 18 to 24-year-old Native American students are enrolled in college. Yeah, most of us got that right at 19%. So quite different than the 41% that we saw as the kind of average across the country. So that agrees with what we saw in the video in terms of that rate being much lower. Hannah still in the lead. Zeta coming from behind in second place. All right, with the 5th question, how many rides are at Disney World? Got it right. Hannah's still in the lead. We're going to go ahead and go to the next question. What percentage of full-time enrolled students graduate within 6 years in the US? So this is, again, the US average. %. We had 7 get that right. So that's the US average of students who graduate once they start college. Antonio now in the lead, answering 6 correctly in a row. Next question is, how many Earths can fit inside the sun? Twelve people got that right with 1.3 million. All right, now Jeffrey's in the lead. We've had a few different people switching around. We'll go on to the 8th question. This is now, what percentage of full-time enrolled Native students graduate within 6 years? Two people got that right, so 41%. So actually we definitely underguessed that based on the video. But that's actually where that number 7 does come from, because we had 19% go and we have about 41% graduate. And so I kind of forgot to consider the graduation. So that number that was in that video is actually pretty up to date. It's actually around 8 people now, but still very low in terms of who we expect to graduate from college or from their undergrad. All right, let's check the scoreboard now. Jeffrey's still in the lead. All right, question 9. Which singer's real name is Stephanie Joanne Angelina Germanata? Could have completely mispronounced that. Lady Gaga, most people got that right. Staying up to date with pop. Jeffrey in the lead, 9 in a row, knows as Lady Gaga. True or false, my existence proves the resilience in my DNA. All right, 22 got it right. I will give you guys a hint. The next couple are going to be the obvious answer. But I just wanted to make sure that we don't kind of sit on the statistics that we found kind of that left us feeling bad from the last video, or even upset, or even kind of discouraged. So I want to make sure that we leave this kind of game on a high note. So there will be similar questions to that one to finish this off. All right, question 11. Oh, there's another one in here. Where would you find the Sea of Tranquility? Six got it right. That's probably our lowest one so far. It's actually on the moon. All right, there's the current score. Jeffrey in the lead. We've got another true or false. Indigenous people are some of the world's first academics. All right, 21 going with true. That is true, and something that we'll talk about a little bit right after this game. Jeffrey's still in the lead. Kiara coming up as well, now in third. Antonio in second. All right, second to last question. What was the name of the dog the Soviet Space Agency sent up in low space orbit in 1957? They're getting harder. split. All right, 7, 7, 8, and 2. Leica is correct. I believe Dolly was the first sheep in space. So that's also a fun fact to take with you. We'll go to this last question. We still have Jeffrey in the lead, Antonio and Chiara, and Ko coming up to 4th. All right, true or false, I can achieve my goals. This should be a quick and simple one. All right, 23 believes that. That's good. I hope we can get that to 25 by the time we're done here, or at least in the near future. All right, we have Chiara in 3rd, Antonio in 2nd, and in 1st we have Jeffrey. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and go from there. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the game for now. Does taking a break seem like a good idea? A good like 3 to 5 minute break before we continue?
That works. 5
All
minutes.
right, we'll go ahead and do a 5-minute break. So we'll go ahead and meet back here at 1:25. That's my time, so that'd be 10:35, 10:25 for you all?
Yes,
10:25 for you all.
for most of us.
For most of you.
I want to introduce you to Rudy McCormick. He is our director he's on this side from my screen, just so you guys know each other.
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Rudy. How are you?
Doing well, and yourself?
Doing well.
Good, good.
All right, I think mostly everyone is back, so that's good.
Okay, perfect. Well, then we'll keep going. As I mentioned, part of what's really important to me is making sure that we kind of don't stop in the storytelling of the part where we see the kind of discouraging numbers, but making sure that we really understand the strengths that we bring as Native people as well to college or to whatever that next step may be. And so one thing I think that's really important to remember is that we are never alone. And then when we look at those numbers, you think, I mean, both of our stories were we were the only Native peoples in our classes. We had we saw the numbers and the statistics of what we expect in terms of the people around us in a given kindergarten setting and how many we expect to actually get through and graduate. And what I want to kind of emphasize is that the first thing is we are people built on community. So that includes making sure that we're taking care of each other. We're finding that community. We're supporting each other, whether it's people that you're actually in school with, whether it's people from this cohort in future years. Make sure that we're kind of constantly trying to build that community. And remember that we know that our cultures kind of teach us that kind of relatives are around wherever we go, whether it's other local Native and Indigenous peoples that we're able to meet, whether it's you know, the plants around us, the sky, the earth. There's a lot of ways that we can be around the relatives and bring our ceremonies wherever we go. And that's one way to really connect to home. And I think that's something that was important for me, being far from home, especially when I was in New York, and then most of my family was either in Arizona or Colorado, was making sure that there were those little things that connected me to home on a regular basis. I think it was important to understand that there are other Indigenous academics out there also experiencing similar struggles. That's where some of the importance of those kind of larger networks, or if there are others at your school, I think that was something that was really important for me in undergrad, was connecting to, I lived in an all Native dorm, actually, my first 2 years. And so my roommate and I stayed good friends all 4 years. So even when we weren't talking to each other every day, it was something when we saw something kind of keep coming up or a similar struggle, it was something that we could kind of bring to each other and talk through, because we were experiencing very similar things. And I think also remembering that we do come from generations of scientists, and that was something we brought up at the end of that game was Indigenous peoples are some of the world's first academics, the first scientists. And that's something that we've been building into our culture for millennia. That's pretty much the basis of ceremony, language. All these things are based on trial and error, and connected down to basically the scientific method in a lot of different ways. But I think that's something that's really important to remember. So I just wanted to kind of give some extra examples of that and just make sure that that's reinforced in us as students and potentially, I'm not sure everyone's desired path, but scientists as well. And I think it's just to remember that we've always been advanced in STEM. As I mentioned, about 95% of Native American inventions were created. Yeah.
I heard you click, just so you know, you're sharing your Spotify playlist. If you
Oh, interesting.
Your presentation, but you did get a comment from Zeta that said you had a nice playlist.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. How do I make sure I'm sharing the right screen? Let's see. Let's try this now. Is that working now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I had a good Spotify playlist then. Well, here's what I had beforehand. That was what I just said. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that now. But about 95% of inventions were basically created by indigenous people far before the rest of the world caught on to it. So some of these examples are kind of farmers and cross-pollination to develop new foods. A lot of these kind of foods that we consider indigenous strains, indigenous species, a lot of these were kind of created and crossbred by indigenous people. So whether it's avocados, beans, different nuts, fruits, tomatoes, pumpkins, squash, those are all different things that are a result of crossbreeding, cross-pollination. And then also thinking about kind of the three sisters sustainable crop farming, if you're thinking about corn, beans, and squash, of how each of those provide something different to whether it's kind of shade, whether it's insect or pest prevention. Being able to kind of bring this type of farming method is something that did originate here in the Americas. And then kind of also thinking about breeding and domesticating animals for different uses, whether it's riding horses, whether it's using dogs to hunt, things like that. A lot of those are historically part of indigenous cultures as well. And here was an interesting slide. I actually got this from someone from a different presentation that I saw at an ACES conference actually, and it was comparing how long the time lag was between when an indigenous group did it versus kind of a more European-based group. And so something like the scalpel was about 500 years before by the Mayans as compared to the Greeks. You have aqueducts or kind of ways to start figuring out how water is moving and how water is organizing and to being able to redirect it to communities. And that we see about a 400-year time span difference between the Olmec and the Romans. When it comes to asphalt, there was about a 3,000 year difference. Copper axes, about 5,000 years in terms of the Ojibwe versus Northern Europe. In geometry and thinking kind of the basis of mathematics, we see about 600 years before with the Mayans as compared to the Greeks. So just that's something to kind of keep with you, that indigenous peoples have always kind of been advanced in STEM and we're not really meant to be separated from the academies, or at least not from the lessons that are the things that they're teaching there. And then just kind of kind of keep supporting this is, here's just an example of some kind of famous Native scientists throughout history. We have Elias Parker, who was he was Seneca. He was an advisor to Ulysses S. Grant. He wrote the Articles of Surrender for the Civil War, but also brought his vision of government as part of the founding of the Union, which then later set as becoming some of the founding principles of the US government. But a lot of that is from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy up in the Northeast. We have Susan LaFlèche Picotte, who was the first Native American medical doctor from the Omaha Nation. We have Bertha Parker, who was an archaeologist. And we have Mary Ross, who, I don't know if anyone's seen the movie Hidden Figures, but she's the Cherokee mathematician for the space program. kind of moving forward, we have Fred Begay, who's a nuclear physicist, who's Dene and Ute. We have Thomas David Petit, Chippewa Nation, who has over 50 patents as an inventor. And the next two, I know personally, I think Carol might also know, but they're also involved in ASIS, or the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. We have John Harrington, who's an astronaut from Chickasaw Nation, and Aaron Yazzie, who's gotten a lot of kind of publicity recently with his with the Mars rovers launches. He's an engineer for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and has some of his own technology and work on Mars currently. Let's see, someone. Awesome. Listen to a podcast on Aaron Yazzie. Yeah, great guy. But just wanted to really show that there are Native scientists out there, and we aren't alone, and there's kind of a lot that we can kind of keep building on, because there is a lot of momentum and a lot of like legendary people to look up to as well. And so kind of why does academia need us? And I think that's important, because a lot of times it's coined as, you know, we need academia, or we need to go to college. And I think there are a lot of different opportunities that opens, but in a lot of ways, through my experience, I really believe that academia needs us and our perspectives. And I think it comes to a lot of the ways of how we're kind of born with different worldviews, and how we balance a culture and a whole knowledge system built into that culture, and then how we can also then approach either academia or what I'll call kind of Western science. And the first is that we do have a distinct advantage. So when we see all these numbers of low graduation rates, it has nothing to do with our intellect or our ability. It has more to do with a lot of situational issues. And I think one thing that's really important is that the Native way of knowing is how this was put previously, but also just thinking about all of the knowledge that's built into different cultures, whether it's into the language, into the ceremonies. It is a very powerful complement. It doesn't necessarily have to be one is right or wrong, or one is better than the other, but they are complementary in a lot of ways. And so, and one example is that, you know, I mentioned this earlier, traditional knowledge is a result of millennia of trial and error. We're continuously refining what we know. That's how our languages have been built, how the ceremonies have been built, how our observations of the natural world have really steered a lot of what we consider culture. We bring an experiential view of science. We don't see ourselves as going into a laboratory and taking things out of place and studying them. Rather, we study them in place. We're part of it. And so that's kind of this next point of science should be experienced in place and be integrative versus dissective. We can never completely separate from the object. And so this is something that I've been finding very interesting actually throughout my doctorate program, was trying to figure out how to write about some of these things in terms of settler science, or Western science really focuses on 4 elements of fire, water, earth, air. And that's kind of, and the physical aspects and the tangible. But what a lot of Native science brings and a lot of the culture brings is they add on an element of spirit and spirituality. And this is actually from Einstein, who said that the ancients knew something that we seem to have forgotten. All means prove but a blunt instrument if they have not behind them a living spirit. And so this is the idea that no matter what we're looking at, what we're trying to figure out and understand, there's another living spirit behind that. And so for us to really know it takes a lot of humility. It's not really us being so smart we figured something out. It's really being patient and letting that reveal itself to us. And so I think that's something that's interesting. And one way that we do that is not just developing our scientific skills, but building our spirit and our understanding through culture and through kind of that holistic perspective that we have been developing as a community of people. And so here's just an example of that, of how these two systems can be complementary. And one example that someone mentioned to me once was kind of around virus pandemic containment. And it's something that someone actually showed this to me before COVID was a big thing. And so that is kind of why I use this. It's something we can relate to. And that's the idea of, if we think about kind of that dissective versus the lived and integrative experience of science we have when it comes down to a virus outbreak, the science perspective really, how do we control it in a microscopic world? How do we put it in immediate environment, study the virus, develop a vaccine? And I think that, is important, but when you look at it from a more holistic view or community view or even a Native perspective, it comes down to observing and controlling human behavior, group dynamics, really controlling the interactions that we have. I think that is something very important in the idea of both are separate approaches, but both are also needed. And so I think that's where we have this idea of there doesn't necessarily have to be a right or wrong, but we can kind of start learning how do we start braiding these two knowledge systems together. And I think that's where Native people specifically have an advantage when it comes to research, when it comes to the classroom. And it might not always be felt in the immediate classroom because the people teaching it don't have that same perspective. And so that's where some of these challenges and obstacles do come, is that we have a whole different perspective that is needed, but as long as the people we work with also see it's needed, that's what I think limits some of the success and is an extra boundary that we have to navigate. But that is actually something that has stemmed and started my whole area of research. And so I will just kind of share a brief overview of what my research was for my dissertation. And that's around the idea of just sustainable design, which has been so focused on just how do we develop better technologies? How do we, improve our sustainability by reducing, emissions is kind of what the big thing has been. But what I the kind of Native perspective is the idea that these things aren't studied or shouldn't be studied in kind of single boxes. And that's the way engineering does that often. And so one thing that I brought and thought was very important was let's not just look at the technological, but let's bring in the ecological. So how do we focus on living in kind of harmony and synergy with the ecological world? And what kind of was a result was there was a lot more opportunities for businesses, for people, for engineers, for academics to focus a lot more on what are we actually inputting and giving back to the land. And if we can put this into their language in terms of the math and the science and papers that they want to hear, then we can kind of start expanding their own opinions by kind of being able to talk in that language. And so that's kind of what my whole dissertation was on. But I think there's a few points that I learned from this in which engineering does really focus on dominating the natural world. It's all about controlling things. But I think our cultures bring a value of harmony or for the Dene Hojo and respect and humility. And that's a very different approach to how we operate in the world. It's not necessarily about control. It's about being able to find that harmony and that ability to understand the value of the things around us and not be so kind of self-centered or human-centric in the way that we build and design technologies. And I think it also comes down to the idea that we are stewards of the land. And so that's part of kind of what that included as this developed, is a lot of what I brought was, if we want to make sure that if we are taking different gifts, from Mother Nature, how do we make sure that we're returning that? And so that's a big part of in this figure, the cycle of the inputs into the ecological system. That's something that we really brought into our work. And I think in general, bridging knowledge is about how do we take what's already being done and kind of dissect it and challenge what the current system is or the conventional way of thinking, and bringing things like those different values from our culture and from who we are. And so that's a big thing for me here in terms of bringing sustainable design to expand that boundary to include ecological stewardship as well. So I just wanted to do a quick breakout room. I think we have those, I think already set with the groups I think you mentioned, Carol.
I need to recreate a couple really quick because we did, I needed to change them from the 12 that we had this morning. How many were you hoping to have? Just like
4 or 5 is probably good.
5.
So having, I think 4 to 5 people in them would be good.
Okay.
But the question we'll focus on is, can you in your group think of a similar example of how a cultural lens may change an approach to something that you've been learning in school? And I want that to kind of bridge anything in terms of, it can be math, science, language, art, PE, anything where you think that there's something that a different lens could, or even just a different perspective could expand on something that you've already been learning. Does that seem clear to people? Is there any questions?
And then are you able to put, oh, okay, Kiara's on it. She put it into the chat so people are aware. And then I think, just gonna move some people around. And then how long would you like the breakout rooms open?
Let's do it for about 4 to 5 minutes to let them have some conversation, and then we'll have people come back and share.
Great, I'm opening the breakout rooms. Now, I don't know if I need to take, I think I put you in a breakout room. 1 second. Okay, they're all set up. Time is set, opening them now.
And then Carol, okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, so welcome back, everyone. Yeah, so if you can pick someone from the group to kind of share any ideas that were had, that'd be great to kind of bring them back to the group. I don't know who those groups were, so I'm going to trust people to speak up from those groups.
So for group 1, can we have Mateo share?
Sure. Our group talked about how maybe languages could be talked, and what else? How multiple views other than just you know, the Western view be shared. And there was one more thing, but I forgot. I was packing for right now, so.
Great, thank you for sharing, Mateo. Next will be Callista, and then we have the list of who else will be sharing, so know that you'll be called next.
Our group talked about the same thing. Also, we emphasized that doing like background research, or like, you know, just to comfort the student in their own environment, their beliefs and social behaviors. You know, you want to recognize certain things about the other that you could relate to.
Awesome.
Now I have Tennille.
Our group, Hannah, she was talking about the art, and then Antonio, he was talking about how it's the same thing with art and like the history of it. And yeah, I don't really remember what exactly he said, but it was kind of similar to Hannah's.
So in that art could be changed somehow? Did you say Antonio was the one who had the idea? Yeah. Antonio, can you share what you?
It was Hannah.
Hannah? Okay, Hannah, can you share a little bit from your group?
It was Hannah, and then Antonio added on.
It was kind of like having a significance behind your art and not just, I guess, just doing it just to do it. And then Antonio said having like good thoughts and a good mindset when you're creating art.
Thanks. So that intentionality, that is so important. And I feel like when you're making rugs and different things, that's something that our elders do teach. Great, thank you. Can I have Jeffrey share for his group?
We couldn't really figure out like a right answer, or not right answer, but like an answer for the question. We were just kind of all over the place with it. But I would say we were very similar to the first 3 groups, but we just couldn't really decide on like the answer for us.
What are some ideas that you came up with? I don't think there is necessarily a right answer. It's ideas. So what are some of those ideas?
You would have to ask Autumn for that. Like, got a little lost halfway through.
Autumn?
Oh, I said like science, and I was thinking art. So like science, you know, like the trial and error. Like most scientists these days, like they usually have like a controlled room, while most Native Americans, like you know, we were, I guess, we put ourselves in there. Like for example, the water, like we had to go through like maybe thousands of trials and errors. While maybe scientists like nowadays, you know, they can just like set up like a small, like I guess, eco environment in a different room, like where it wasn't like how it was back in the day. Like they just quickly do like a small little test in like a room. And for art, I was thinking like, you know, having what I think group two said, like having a positive mindset. And maybe because like, especially in the Navajo Nation, maybe like putting more, I guess, of our culture into the art, like so that way we know what our art is and like how, what to do with it, or like what they mean and represent, things like that.
Great, thanks, Autumn. And then we have Twanisha, and then Kayumari will be next.
Oh, well, our group, Taylor said something about on the presentation, the settlers before they came, and the Native Americans, they were already, I guess, knowing about math. And then she said something about how it can motivate us to continue doing that. And then I said something about how it can help the judgment of a person from between right and wrong. Now it's pretty much the conversation.
Yeah, so including that history and having representation can help, like saying you have people who did it and you can too. All right, what about Kayumari? Hi, Kayumari. I see that you're unmuted, but I can't quite hear you. So you can put it in the chat. Thank you for being ready. I think that's all of the groups, Michael. So if you wanted to stay out, shared out.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for your responses and your willingness to kind of have that conversation. It was, I mean, as there really wasn't a right answer, but I think it's interesting how many things that we can point out at this point of whether it was kind of making better decisions as a community, or I thought the response around kind of ethics on right or wrong was very interesting. And I think there's almost two ways this can go in terms of redeveloping education in the way that we're teaching younger students so that they are learning their culture within the classroom. So when we talk about involving the culture and the art, involving even cultural into PE and learning some of the traditional games, yeah, and even making sure the histories come from the proper perspectives. I think that's also all very important in terms of transforming the classroom. But it's also an opportunity for a bunch of, as Native students and Native people going into these fields, it is an opportunity to recognize things like that and try to kind of steer them, and trying to kind of think of that of your own, out of your own interest. And that's a way that I think a lot of new research will develop in the near future. I think it'll be about kind of breaking down the disciplines that we think of in terms of science, math, art, all these things as different studies or different classes. And I think a lot of the newer ways that we'll learn and teach is making that all kind of interdisciplinary, or making sure that understanding how a lot of the decisions we make from one lens is limited, and we need to kind of start including these different perspectives. And I think it's going to start breaking down the way that we've divided those types of classes. But that's kind of just my own perspective in research. And I think a lot of the more and more that people bring kind of their other interests or their cultural background, or even just whatever different lived experiences we come from, the more we can bring that into academia, the more that will transform the way that people are taught in the next generation and in the next generation from there. So that's I guess both kind of a challenge and an opportunity, specifically as Native people. And so I guess we are running out of time. So I'm just going to kind of summarize a few of the things in terms of kind of what I believe are some of the opportunities in academia, and a lot of what I think that is exposure to new ideas and ways of thinking. Being able to meet people with both similar and different interests and ideas was so huge for me, especially in undergrad, of being able to start kind of developing who I was by the people around me and all the different things I learned. I think it helps narrow a lot of your focus and kind of explores different ideas and visions and opportunities for what the future might look like for you. And again, it can help develop a career. It could help provide for you and your community. But I think one of the main things that I want to take away is from today is that your worldview or your culture is a novel perspective for academia and research. And so from there, I think some of the other things I've learned is just in terms of if you do, once you do get to college or you're kind of at that next step, I think for me, the biggest thing was kind of build community as early as you can. And I think some of the opportunities for that are through, you know, just your local people on campus, the friends that you make. I think there's a lot of opportunity at on-campus multicultural centers. That's where I think I found a lot of kind of my friend groups or places that I felt welcome to. I think there's a lot of opportunity in national organizations. So I think, I mean, Carol mentioned that we met through ASIS, or the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. I think that's huge. It's a big organization that has conferences throughout the year. It's opportunities to meet other people, opportunities to kind of keep building your network of friends. But also, I think for me, it helped kind of develop and find mentors as well. I think the only reason I ever did go off and attempt to do my PhD was because of a mentor that I met through ASIS, and other, you'll just kind of start meeting a lot more like-minded people. And it can kind of help you also kind of in your career or in your studies, kind of find, you know, internships, kind of all these connections that can help you. There's other organizations like SACNAS, the Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in STEM or in science. There's also ones that aren't really necessarily steered towards academia, but like CNAY, the Center for Native American Youth. I know Unity is a popular one. I think Running Strong for American Indian Youth is also a great organization. That's actually how one of the grants that we got that helped with NASEP and the iPad covers and a few of the other things. And so I'm actually I'll list some of the ones that I mentioned in the chat for you guys to either look at on your own or when you have a chance. But they're things to definitely look into. And for me, provided not just a huge network, but a ton of professional opportunities. Actually, Carol, if I put in the acronyms, will you go ahead and fill in the rest of the words if you know them?
Yes. So I have the Running Strong for American Indian Youth website here, so I can put that in.
Perfect. Yeah, those are kind of the four that came to my mind. There's also like local cultural centers. So I think depending on where you end up and how far away from home you get, that is something that's been huge for me out in Ohio. And Ohio right now is an area where there's no federally recognized tribes, but we have a local kind of Indian centers or cultural centers. So I've been very involved with NACO, which is the Native American Indian Center of Central Ohio. It's been a huge home for me in terms of being able to find a group that still does certain ceremonies, whether it's, you know, just coming together for a meal or just being around other Native people. I've met other Dene or Navajo people out here as well that I didn't even know, you know, lived out here. So that's been great. It kind of helps you stay close to your community and your culture. And as I mentioned before, I think just staying in touch, even with this group as your NASEP cohort, can build a lot for you. And so that was one thing for me that was huge when I first started kind of moving away, going to school, was building community. Some of the other things that I find very important. And I think one really important thing for me is make sure that you try new things and you're creating time for your passions outside of the classroom. I think that was huge for me. It was the reason why I mentioned I did a minor in music. It was something that kept me involved with something I knew I loved, but something I probably wouldn't have made a lot of time for had I not kind of committed to it. Yeah, and I think that's part of what will develop. And when I think about all of the experiences I have, and when it kind of comes time into kind of a professional interview or things where you're starting to, build that network, very, very few times you actually talk about an experience in a classroom. It usually comes down to whether it's extracurriculars or different stories or projects, things within your culture. Those are the things that you kind of get to talk about and stand out as who you are when it comes to trying to either apply for things or yeah, pretty much anytime you're trying to kind of network or build a brand on yourself, it's around understanding what makes you different than everyone else. And so I think that's something really important is keep your interests and make sure that you have time for those. And one other thing I've really learned especially from a Native perspective, is we do approach academia very differently. It's more about we're doing this for our community or for some responsibility that we feel we have back to our people. Whereas I think a lot of other people I've met throughout the academic, basically through any college I've been at, was really about individual promotion and success. And so I think that's something I hope that we continue to make sure we instill in each other as a community, is we're doing this to kind of advance the opportunities of our people, not just ourselves. And kind of lastly, one thing I think was really important for me was really don't compare yourself to those around you. I think we all have a very different journey. And when we get stuck up on things like GPAs or grades or anything like that, it can really be kind of detrimental to the way you value yourself. And I think it's really important to remember that there's not really a correct path. Everyone's journey is going to look a little bit different, and that's really what makes you who you are. And so I think that's important to remember. But we have, I think, about 5 minutes left. We're going to wrap up around 2:15. So I just wanted to kind of leave open any time that anyone had for questions, and it can kind of be about anything.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how challenging would you say your doctor's was?
I actually would say, I actually thought, I guess between 1 and 10, I would go with a 6 or 7. I think it's a lot more time than it is challenging. I think you spend so much time developing these ideas that when it comes down to it, it's like you get stuck on some things, but you're talking through it with an advisor. I think the main thing was just it's just a ton of time.
We did listen to the All My Relations podcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with All My Relations podcast.
Yeah.
It was the episode on can a DNA test make me Native American? And so Dr. Tallbear talked a lot about genetics and academia in the same sense that you're talking about it. And so I just wanted to point out in the chat what Kiara said. Note from yesterday's podcast, academia is not a lifestyle choice. You should have a very particular problem you want to solve, and you should bring that to the university. And you should bring the university resources to do that. And so I thought that was cool that stood out to her. Do you have a similar sentiment for that, especially since you've been in academia so long?
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. The one thing that I would say is kind of in my undergrad, my first kind of 4 years, I don't think I would have known what that particular problem would have been. I think a lot of that did develop in undergrad. And so I think before you ever take off and go to grad school or things like that, definitely have in mind what you want to do. It's not meant to just be a thing that you stick around as an academic, but I 100% agree on that. Is it's an opportunity and a tool to solve issues that you already see. And along the lines too, is it can open a bunch of doors. I think one thing that's just happens in the way the world's and society's operating right now is sometimes just having a different title or degree opens different doors that you might not have really been able to open without it. And right or wrong, sometimes that is the way it is. And I think there's a lot of ways that we've been challenging that as a society, but I think that's another kind of reason to do it. But definitely find that issue and that problem you want to solve before you really get too deep into anything.
Do you have any other questions?
Did you get any scholarships? Like, because you went all the way up to your doctorates, like, how did you pay for, I guess, your school?
Sure. So undergrad, I actually, most of my funding came from financial aid. So just based on income from the FAFSA. So not necessarily scholarship. I did get like an additional grant, but the majority of the money that I got for undergrad came from just based on need-based, it's a need-based fellowship from FAFSA or the federal government. So it was basically just based on my parents' income, saying that there was a need for extra funding for me to even be able to go to school. And after undergrad, I actually applied straight into my PhD program. And so a lot of times when you do that, most students as PhD students actually get paid. So we don't actually pay to go to school. We usually get paid as researchers. And so because I applied right out of undergrad, I got paid to do my master's and my my doctorate.
Getting paid to go to school? What? That's cool.
It's not a ton. You'd probably make a lot more going out into a different job, but it's still definitely livable.
Getting paid to travel too, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've been all over, from presenting research and going to conferences. There's a lot of opportunities for traveling.
And something I want to point out as well, in addition to doing his doctorate in chemical engineering, I know that Michael's also very involved with environmental issues. He was talking about climate change. I think he spoke with like the UN before on issues of indigenous peoples and climate change. That's a big thing that we've had this program. One of the other presenters who works for the Tanatam Water Resources Department as the director, he was like, if people ask about me and say, do I speak for Mother Earth? Tell them, yes, I speak for Mother Earth. And so I think that I would also say that you also speak for Mother Earth as well. I don't know if you want to talk about your experience with those opportunities as well.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm also gonna, I kind of had a slide for kind of the conclusions that I talked about. So I'm just gonna put them in the chat in case that's something anyone wants to refer to later. But I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I've been able to work with the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on climate change. And a lot of that has been kind of a combination of my academic interests, but also understanding where a lot of my research falls short. And this idea of publishing within, chemical engineering journals takes away a lot of the ability to tell the story. And I think storytelling's super important, the way that we pass down information or even spread it from peer to peer and within kind of indigenous cultures. And so that is something I've been able to get involved in. I've been able to travel kind of all over and talk about, mostly what I advocate for is basically the need for indigenous peoples to be at the table, the need for us to not just value the climate scientists or the things like the numbers that we see in reports, but exactly what we talked about today, that the idea that there's a need to braid this knowledge. There's going to be complementary information, and the way we make decisions should be rooted in both. And down to what was brought up earlier, like it comes down to in a lot of ways, community ethics and making sure that what we're doing and these decisions that we make, we need to understand the consequences. And so that is something that's been kind of a huge part of my last 5 years as well. And through it, I've been able to travel kind of all over the world through that, which has been a very awesome experience.
Thank you, Michael. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I think we'll get ready to close out the session. But just to extend my thanks to you so much, I really appreciate that you brought in that strengths perspective of what our students bring to the table, because that is so important. And I feel like from the video before, as I said before, I was like, oh, it has me a little bit down, it's weighing on me. But after sharing those experiences of different people who have all those Indigenous people who had these fantastic discoveries and just the examples of people who we could look up to really warmed my heart. And so at the end of this presentation, I am feeling good and think that, again, we deserve and need to be in academia and bring so much strength to those aspects. I do also appreciate the activities that happened. The trivia was really fun, and also adding those other statistics and the discussion. Again, there didn't have to be a specific right answer for those ideas, but the fact that the students were saying that we need to include cultural aspects, language, values, history, representation into the space shows that they know the changes that they can make and changes that need to be brought so that they can learn and do better in these academic spaces. So I think that's great that you had them discuss this. And so I also hope that they're feeling empowered as well after this presentation. If you could put your email in the chat, I don't know if you put that already in case students want to get a hold of you with any other questions. I know Kiara says she's going to be going into pharmacy, but was like, I was thinking about doing chemical engineering at one point, but I wasn't sure. So maybe you could be a mentor to her as well. She's an undergraduate student, but yeah, just thank you so much. I really appreciate this presentation, and I'm glad that we got connected through ACES. So if I could have the students unmute themselves, we're going to give our presenter a big thank you on the count of 3. Once I see that they're starting to unmute, good, I see unmuting. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Enjoy the rest of the day, and again, feel free to reach out to me about anything that you might still have questions about. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you at ACES in Phoenix. We'll see you later.
I plan on being there. See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.
So welcome back, students. I hope you had a good stretch and a good break. We are joined by Josephine Kamkoff. Did I pronounce your last name right?
Yes.
Josephine Kamkoff from the ITEP program. So I know of 2 different ITEPs. There is the Indigenous Teacher Education Project at the University of Arizona, but there's also another ITEP that's in conjunction with Northern Arizona University, and she's going to tell us what that acronym is once she gets started. But we're really thankful that she's here presenting air quality to all of us today. She knows Mansell, who is a mentor to Natalia, and Natalia last year was able to do an internship with the ITEP program. And so of course she made wonderful connections and has brought people with so much knowledge in the area of environmental sciences and health to the NASEP community, and that includes Josephine. And so again, we're just excited to hear about air quality and the knowledge that she has. So I'm going to give her the floor to introduce herself and present her presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you so much for having me. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you. And also, I'm so happy that you're able to attend this summer school online, although it is your summertime and it's online, and it's a little bit of a drag to be on the internet all the time. I think it's excellent that you're able to further your education and get some new information through this program. And I'd like to thank Rudy and Carol for this. I did get to work with Natalia last year, and some of you, I might remember some of you from our work last year, and she's just absolutely so much fun to work with and so enthusiastic for education that it's always nice to hear from her and be able to work with her on educational issues. I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation here. I have to flip back and forth, so I hope you don't mind that. But I work for the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals. It's a part of Northern Arizona University under the Office of Native American Initiatives. Northern Arizona University, or NAU, has the goal of graduating the most Native Americans in the country. So we get to work with natives and tribes across the country as a part of ITEP, which is the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, and work on furthering education and furthering tribal programs across the United States in the interest of environmental protection. So I'm going to share a different screen now. Hey, wait a second. What do you see there? Do you see the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals?
We see a slide that has your name and then I think might have a little bit of your experience possibly.
Oh, good.
Or your background.
Yes, good. The one I see is different than the one you see, which I think is interesting. My name is Josephine Kamkoff. I am Yupik from the west coast of Alaska. And you can see that over there in that little star-shaped thing on the west coast of Alaska. My family is from there. And then also I have family from Washington State, which is down in the lower right corner. And we are all the way on the coast from the islands in that area. It's called the Puget Sound. And there's a lot of islands in there. And like the Southwest, there are a lot of tribes from that region. Both of my tribes and bands in Alaska, they're called bands. And my bands in Alaska and my tribes in Washington State are both coastal salmon people. So I come from salmon people, and that's really just our main diet is salmon. I'm also the community program coordinator for ITEP. And what I do is I coordinate programs for tribal communities in education and environmental education and air quality. I can do some water quality work sometimes. And I also teach quality assurance project planning. And all that is some fancy words to say that I teach tribes how to plan their projects so that they're good working plans, so that they're able to use the plans and have excellent programs. So I'm going to go back to, so now you should be able to see the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, is that right? All right.
Yes.
We're going to skip that one. Our mission statement at the Environmental Education Outreach Program, I'm just going to say EEOP now because that's a lot of words. So we really want to provide you with life-changing experiences, and we want to give you the power as Native Americans to become self-determined citizens of your own sovereign nations or tribes. And that's just a lot of fancy words to say that if you want to work within your tribe, we want you to be able to make decisions as a citizen and a member of your tribe to make your own decisions about the health of your environment and how your tribal government runs their operations. And we want to give you the skills, the knowledge, the abilities, the education, the self-esteem, and the confidence to be able to do those things. Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody have anything, any comments about that? None. I will move on. So I'm going to talk about the Clean Air Act. And the Clean Air Act is a legal act, and it's a legal document from the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. I want to make sure that you guys know what the EPA is. Do you have a little bit of knowledge about the Environmental Protection Agency? Can I get some yeses or nos in the chat box, please?
I feel like I know of the organization, and so like some people are saying a little but not much. Somebody said no, somebody said no. I don't think so. Let me see.
All
No, so a
right.
lot of no's.
Oh, lots of no's. Okay, so I don't have a slide for it, but what we can do is we can go ahead and we can look at the EPA website. And so can you see the Environmental Protection Agency's website on there?
Yes, we do.
All right, so this page is ambient monitoring technology. That's a lot of what I teach. But what the Environmental Protection Agency is a part of the executive branch of the United States government. And the executive branch is under the President of the United States. And the Environmental Protection Agency was created to protect the United States citizens from health hazards and toxins and pollution that is created by industry or even the military. So what they had to do was they had to create laws and regulations for air quality and water quality and toxins and agriculture and for energy companies, so that when they're performing their operations that they don't pollute and kill the citizens of the United States. So the section of the EPA that we're talking about is the Clean Air Act, and under laws and regulations, the Clean Air Act has its own section. And this is the law of the land, and it's run by the president's office. So the executive office has some control over it, but they do not have the power to change the basis of the Clean Air Act. That is something that has to go through multiple channels, through state, local, and tribal authorities in order for them to change the basic template of the Clean Air Act. But they do have the power and the authority to change like how the Clean Air Act is enforced. So those are really important things to know about. And also it's really important to know about how the US government has the ability to protect its citizens from pollution and hazards, and what they do to stop industry or stop agencies from poisoning citizens and giving them, I mean, things like cancer. Mesothelioma is a really big important one, and you've probably seen commercials about that on TV. That is a part of the Clean Air Act where people are protected from breathing asbestos dust, which causes lung cancer pretty much 100% of the time. So that is what we're talking about today, and it's the law of the land. It's a legal authority in the United States government. Do you have any questions, or does anyone have any comments about the Environmental Protection Agency?
I know that we recently kind of had, of course, a shift in kind of our government or in presidents. Do we see that there's a lot of shift in the EPA based on kind of who's in office, or I don't know if you have a perspective on that.
Wow, that's a really good question, Rudy. Thank you for that. And yes, it is. There is always a shift, especially when the presidential seat is taken by a Republican or a Democrat. There's always a shift in that. And since the recent change in the previous administration, which was Donald Trump, the previous administration had sort of put a hold on or put a stop to a lot of the enforcement agreements that the United States had with the states. So what that means was that the states could not enforce the laws that were enacted under the Clean Air Act. And once the administration changed to a Democratic administration, which is just fancy words for saying that once President Biden was sworn into office, he pretty much immediately reauthorized that authority. So he gave the states permission, and he didn't just give them permission, he ordered them to enforce compliance with the pollution regulations and standards for the protection of American citizens and the environment. So that's a really important question, because it's not just that the citizens are now protected from health hazards and health risks, but also the environment itself is protected under these new enforcement orders from the president's office. And then another thing that happens every time there's a change, not just a change from Republicans to Democrats, but a change in the president, is he appoints a set of people to run the agency. So now there's a whole, there's several thousand people who just work for the EPA, and it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats, and they are all across the country, and they just work for the EPA, and they work under the Clean Air Act. But there's also a set of people who are appointed by the executive office who work in the interest of that office. So since this president has decided to really take climate change as a serious issue and something that he's going to take action on and take on as something that he's going to work to reverse and prevent further damage, his appointees are all tasked with that and have the legal authority to create laws and regulations to prevent further climate change and even reverse quite a bit of it, such as the recent act that you may be interested in looking up is to convert the United States energy infrastructure to 100% renewable energy by 2032. Some of those things are really humongous goals. So it's interesting and exciting to learn about that. And this is a really exciting period in history for the environment for the United States. Are there any other questions or comments about that? Do you guys feel like you understand the Clean Air Act better now and the Environmental Protection Agency? Can you type in some yeses or nos? Or if you'd like me to continue explaining the Environmental Protection Agency? Oh, but I need a narrator because I can't see the comments now.
We're getting a lot of yeses. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, thank you for explaining.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and switch screens back to this presentation. Oh, and there's your comments back. Your comments are on the presentation slide for some reason.
Josephine, just something that you mentioned that I think is important is, I think to some extent, at times I think that we might think like, oh, well, there's entire agencies that are kind of overseeing that. So like, that's their work. But I think that this whole notion, we always talk about just the importance of everyone's voice and of course of their vote as well. And just knowing that there can be kind of implications on these major areas, of course, depending on kind of who is in office, and of course that everybody has an opportunity to kind of look at what our options are, and then to place our vote for whoever that should be, and then hopefully as a country we get whoever is in there will keep the best interests of the country in mind, and the world really. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up too. It's really, they are like, I didn't know that they were legally required to listen to their constituents. So what that means is if you are registered to vote, and regardless if you voted or not, if you are registered to vote in a certain district or a certain area, you can contact your congressmen or your senators, your representatives. You can even contact the President of the United States. You can send them your opinion and your, what you want them to do, and they have to take that into consideration in the public view. So I don't know about behind closed doors, but they have to acknowledge that people are contacting their office and saying that they approve or they disapprove of something. And that's something I recently learned, and I thought that was really interesting, that I didn't know that they had to take our voices into consideration. So I explained a lot about the Clean Air Act, and you can see here Congress, I think this is the Senate. So in order for this to become a law, it has to go through the House and the Senate. So Congress designed the Clean Air Act to protect public health and welfare from different types of air pollution. So I just now discussed that with you guys, and I'll go ahead and so what happened was in the 70s, or in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of smog in a lot of cities, and this was from vehicle emissions. And smog is literally a combination of smoke and fog, the word smoke and fog. And the smoke was really from like manufacturing plants and vehicles and all, whatever they were burning. And so what happened was the air pollution got so bad that people were getting really, really sick, and they had to do something about it because people could no longer even go outside, and it was even becoming difficult for them to breathe inside. And so this dense smog was really bad in the 1970s. And so the government created the Clean Air Act. And later on in the late 70s, and also in the 1990s, there were really major overhauls to the Clean Air Act to target new pollutants. And one of those was mesothelioma and asbestos. And another big problem that has emerged since then has been wildfire smoke and particulate matter from these massive wildfires that we're seeing as a result of climate change. And so there was the creation of the Clean Air Act, and then major revisions to it in 1977 and 1990. So I've already given you a little bit more of a history of it, but like really what the goal was to protect human health and the environment. So what they had to do was they had to set and create a way to meet standards. And what standards are the point where they have to take action. Like if there's a pollution level and the amount is down here, then it's in a green zone and it's okay. And then let's say there's a yellow zone where it's on the border, it's fluctuating, like the smog gets worse during rush hour or something like that. And then there's an area up here where it's above the legal limit and they have to take action to reduce the pollutants. So like for instance, when coal plants were burning, they were not allowed to emit this amount of pollutants from the coal, and that was mostly sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide, which creates some very serious health effects on people and animals. So these problems are stationary, mobile, and natural. And what that means is that like a coal plant is stationary, it's in one place and you can measure that. And then mobile is like from cars and airplanes and things like that. And natural is from events such as wildfires. And these effects are on human health and the environment. So we just now celebrated 50 years of the Clean Air Act. And we can see the timeline here, and I think it's kind of cool that it includes the vehicles too, because vehicle emissions and carbon dioxide are an important part of the clean air and some of the other emissions too that were previous, like say previous to 1970. Back in here, they used to put lead in gasoline, and they didn't know that the lead going out into the environment was going to kill everything and cause permanent neurological problems. And so there was like these massive death events from the time that people really started using cars, which was 1955 to the late 60s. They deposited so much lead into the environment that a lot of different species of animals had, become extinct or near extinct. And that goes along with the Endangered Species Act, which is a whole different topic. And I hope you get to learn about that also. But really these are important years for the Clean Air Act, because as new pollutions have come up, then new protections have also been released, so that we're keeping up with keeping our environment as healthy as it needs to be, so that we don't die and we're not killing the plants and animals in our local ecosystems. So they're required to establish what's called the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. What the standards are is they're based on the health. And so what that means is that they just talk about like places where there's higher densities of population or maybe some endangered animals. And also they consider like places where there's more elderly people or more young children. And then, so that's a primary standard. So what they're saying with a primary standard is this is our number one, this is most important for our standards. Like we can't put people at risk, especially children or elderly people, people with disabilities, and especially communities where there are extremely high rates of asthma or lung cancer. They have to put a priority onto those communities and those people. And secondary standards are important, but they're they have a limit to them, and they're welfare based. And it's welfare in terms of well-being, or how the health and ability to reproduce is, that's what they're talking about with this type of welfare. So that mostly pertains to the core materials such as water, soil, and air that that's required for that community to survive. And that includes farms, plants and animals, like entire ecosystems. And the pollution sources for these are mostly wildfires or catastrophic weather events like hurricanes, earthquakes, and some air pollution things also. And this is really now, we can update this PowerPoint. And now this is really related to climate change. And obviously this slide doesn't have climate change on it, but we'll update that, hooray. And so the National Ambient Air Quality Standards doesn't take into consideration the cost that somebody is going to have to that somebody is going to have to take on. So that's a really important part of it. Like if it's something that is they cannot afford to pay for, then they get shut down. So that's really important and a really big deal for the environment, and especially for the primary standards, which is human health. And they're also required to get input from a scientific community. So they're not, so it's, they can't actually just say like, well, you can't do this because because they feel that this might be a hazard, or they think that this might not be dangerous, or they think that something is too dangerous. They have to actually have empirical evidence. So they have to have somebody that comes in and says, I'm an expert on this. I've been doing this for a zillion years, and I really know what I'm talking about, and I can provide evidence that this is correct, or I can provide evidence that this is wrong. And another thing about this is they have only 6 criteria pollutants. And the reason for that is because these are the elements and compounds that have caused major catastrophic events. So those are particulate matter, ozone, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, and lead. And there are so many sources from this, but I think that's an important thing for you to know. Another aspect of this is the tribal authority rule, and what this says is that tribes are created as sovereign nations, like as a government. The government has created the tribal authority rule so that the tribes are treated exactly as states. So even though you have sovereignty and self-determination, you can't be edged out of the Clean Air Act because you're sovereign nations. And you have to meet the eligibility for this. And I think most of the tribes are able to do this, but have not done it yet. Some of the things, and we won't go too deeply into this because it's a really detailed process, but the tribal authority rule allows tribes to determine what they want to address themselves. And then also, after they determine what they want to address, they allow them to decide how they're going to implement their program. So how they get to plan their program, what they're going to do about the problem that they decided they want to work on, is up to the tribes. So that's giving the tribes the authority to make decisions based on their own free self-determination. A tribe has to be eligible for this, which means they have to be federally recognized. And usually that means they have to have a treaty or something. But every tribe that has this authority, like say they have a water program where they've been determined that they're a tribe as state, which is TAS, then they're automatically eligible for the tribal authority rule. They just have to go through some paperwork and stuff, like proving that they have this land, or proving that this is they have the duty and responsibility to care for that particular land. I know I'm talking too much. Oh my gosh, you guys. So so the next thing we're going to talk about is particulate matter, which is what you guys are working on with your purple air monitors or your wind trackers, which you have been working on or will be working on, what particulate matter is tiny pieces of particles that are floating around in the air. And so really we're just talking about the size of something. It consists of all kinds of things, from the dust in the air that comes off of your skin to the dust that is brought up by the wind. I think some of you are down here in the valley. You got to go through a dust storm the other day. That was a pretty big, exciting thing. And you see the sweepers on the highways all the time, getting the dust off of the highways, and just dust, dust, dust. And there are so many different sources of this, we can't even get into it. But basically, we're looking at two different sizes, and one of them is 2.5 micrometers, and that's pretty small. And then also PM10, which is 10 micrometers, which is also pretty small, but much larger than 2.5. And these are the two sizes of particles that we'll talk about under the Clean Air Act. PM 2.5 is really, really important for inhaled, like people who with asthma or other lung dysfunctions or respiratory illnesses have to really be careful about their PM 2.5. It has pretty serious effects on people's health. And then also PM 2.5 and PM10, like when they're in the air, you can see them. Like on a good visibility day, the horizon is a little bit lighter blue, and as you go up, it's darker blue. But on a bad visibility day, it's usually because of PM 2.5 and PM10, and it changes the color to kind of a gray. And what that is the reflection of the sun back out into the stratosphere is creating that coloring. Do you guys have any questions? Any comments?
How do you find out, like, what, I guess, technology do you use to find the PM2 and 10?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think we're going to talk about that, and Carol has a presentation about some of the technology, which is two different types of monitors, and one of them uses a laser, or they both use lasers, and they are purple air monitors and wind trackers. And so what those do is they shoot a light through the air, and then depending on how far the light can go, like if it can just go straight through, that means there are not particles in the air, or there's very few particles in the air and the air is clean. But if the light goes through and it starts hitting little particles and coming through, like it hits some particles, then it's able to count them and then report back how many particles are in the air. Great, thank you for that question, Autumn. Are there other questions? All right, we're going to skip that, but we will talk about the air quality index is what this is called. So these are all values based on how many particles are in the air. So if you have good air quality, it's in the index value is green, and it means that you're good to breathe. And it goes up to moderate, which is good for healthy people, but some people might have a little bit of a problem. And then unhealthy for sensitive groups, which means that people with respiratory illnesses, such as asthma, will have a problem breathing that air. And then it goes to unhealthy for everyone, which is self-explanatory. Everybody will have a problem breathing. And then there's a health alert, which means that you should go inside or go someplace that's an enclosed area with filters, and make sure you breathe filtered air. And then the hazardous conditions are the conditions where people will begin to have asphyxiation and be unable to breathe that air because there's so much smoke. And then Carol's going to talk about the Air Now website, which is, oh no, she's going to talk about the Purple Air website. I need to get a drink of water. If you can think of a question, that'd be great. So the Air Now website is run by the EPA, and it's the website that shows the air quality in the United States. And all of the monitors in here use the Clean Air Act rules. So you know that this is a reliable set of data. And then I'll talk a little bit about the purple air monitors, and Carol's really going to get into this. But these are just little pieces of equipment. And what they do is you can use a little card to record the data, but also you can put them live online. And how they work is they have a plant tower here, and then they have another plant tower here. And inside of there, they have a temperature sense. They have a thermometer and a humidity sensor, which tells how much water is in the air. And wind trackers operate using a light. So they have a laser particle counter, and they use Bluetooth, and you can just hook it up to your cell phone. Oh, sorry about my coughing. And then so that is not, and so I'll go ahead. Wait a second. So here's my contact information. It says Josephine Kamkoff. People call me Josie. And this is all of the Northern Arizona University Office of Native American Initiatives, Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, Environmental Education Outreach Program, and Technical Air Monitoring Service Center. So I'm pretty low in the totem pole as far as that goes. But it has my email address and my phone number. And I don't know that you guys would ever want to fax me anything, but there's my fax number. And then also a mailing address if you would like to mail something, or if you would like for me to mail something to you also, that information is there. And I just want to express how nice it is to be able to come in here and share this information with you. And I want to thank Natalia and Carol and Rudy for having me. And I'll take any questions if you guys have any questions or comments, or if you want to talk about anything that I just now presented.
I have another question. So with that website you said with the air quality, so if a state has really horrible air quality, who would be the first to step in? Would it be the state that acknowledges it, or would like EPA come in and say like, hey, you need to like start putting down emissions?
It would be the state, and the state they should already have the plan to take care of that problem or take care of that pollutant in that event. And so it's the state receives money from the federal government to take care of the pollution problems. Great question, thank you. Any more questions?
So what I want to have the students do is think of one thing or a word that describes what you learned today. And so we'll put it in the chat, but just type it. And we're going to do something that Rudy calls a waterfall. So just type one thing you learned in the chat, and then I'm going to count us down. So don't hit enter yet. I'll count us down. And then when I say 1, 2, 3, enter, we're going to all enter at the same time, and we'll see a flood of responses of what we learned. So I'll give you a couple moments to type that in the chat. But while you're typing up your response, Josephine, I want to thank you so much for being here. I think that you touched on a lot of different areas and bringing in the aspect of policy, because we have been learning about protecting Mother Earth and the living beings that are here, but that takes an interdisciplinary approach, which includes understanding policy and aspects of public health, in addition to STEM and technology, because of those air quality sensors to be able to track that data. And so you've brought a lot of important points into the different disciplines that go into protecting Mother Earth and its people. So thank you so much. I think ITEP is great too for students who are going to be undergraduate students coming up soon. They do have internships that you can apply to get hands-on experience with the environmental protection agencies. Natalia was able to do that as a graduate student. You can do that as an undergraduate college student as well. I think Rudy was going to say something.
Oh, I was just going to, one of the things I want to make sure we do is get a photo of the group with our guest speaker if we get a chance. Do we want to do that now, Carol, or do we want to do the waterfall first?
We'll do the waterfall first, because I think enough people were able to put their response in the chat. So on the count of 3, you're going to push enter for the waterfall. All right, 1, 2, 3, enter. Oh, yep, I see the waterfall going. So we have air quality from Zeta, stewardship, sustainability. I learned about the Clean Water Act. It was interesting. The Clean Water Act again, protection, Congress designed the Clean Air Act. Oh, it went fast. I gotta breathe faster. Congress designed the Clean Air Act to protect our health and Mother Earth. Clean air, air quality, clean air, clean air. Our vote can impact the environment. Clean air, clean air. The Clean Air Act, the clean air and water. Clean air, environmental sustainability, clean air, and clean air. So those are the highlights of what was learned about today, Josephine.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful, you guys. That is so wonderful. And one thing I want to point out, while the politics is important, I'd like to point out that environmental protection and all of this, the whole EPA and all of this legislation was created by Republicans. And that is something that isn't set in stone, and they just, I don't know, there's something, there's just something to it, but to not be too close-minded about it, because they do kind of tend to flip back and forth like a dying fish or something, like, and there's no predicting how that's going to go. But, even though right now we're rooting for the Democrats, in the past, in issues such as a Clean Air Act, we would have been rooting for the Republicans. So take it with a grain of salt. And I'm glad that you all heard something worthy about the Clean Air Act.
Yes, and I think an important aspect to bring in from the previous perspective is you saw the policy regardless of what party lines it was at. It was interesting for me to see that there was the secondary and primary, where I think for most Indigenous perspectives, it was like we're all interconnected. So I think we would all be considered on the primary level, but we did talk about indigenizing certain things. So that's something I wanted to point out, and I think I pointed out in the chat. Rudy, do we want to do that photo with your camera?
Yes, we're all set for it. So as students, if students can come back on camera, we'll do a quick group photo with Josephine just to capture what she shared with us in a photo real quick. All right, most people coming on here. All right.
And we have your face Kalana and Michaela, can we get you on screen, please?
And Kayla, yeah, Kelana, Michaela, and Kayla. If we're able to get you on, that would be great. Awesome. Getting ready to get started here. 1, 2, 3. All right, I'm gonna do one more there.
I don't know if I can smile like that again.
All right.
That might have been a one-time thing.
All right, here we go. Let's try one more time. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. And I think that you covered a lot of the stuff that Natalia had in her presentation. So thank you for covering those things and driving home the point of what particulate matter is, because I feel like understanding what that particulate matter is and the different designations in terms of how small they can be and how large they can be really sets up that understanding of air quality because of how we can breathe those things in, how it can impact our bodies and lungs, and yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially now that we have COVID, that is very important to understand. Since COVID is most likely transported through vapors that people exhale through their nose and their mouth. That is very important to understand how the air quality affects human health. And it's especially important in environmental in the environmental transport of viruses. And all that is say somebody has a cold or the flu or they have COVID and they touch their face or their nose and they put those viral particles on a surface, it is less dangerous than just sitting there breathing. And if you were to actually take something and collect the vapor that you exhale from your nose and mouth while you're breathing, it would actually contain quite a few different types of viral particles that may not be there may not be enough of them to cause an infection in somebody else, but it is important to be aware that all of these particulates in the air have an effect on human health, and that's something that is really obvious now that we had a whole season without the flu, and that was only because people started wearing a mask. And my nose is running because it started raining and now I'm having some kind of allergies. So, yep. Okay, so I'll let you take over now, Carol.
All right, thank you, Josie. If I can have the students unmute themselves for a moment, and we're going to give her a big thank you. So see folks starting to unmute. All right, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so glad I was able to come in today.
Thank you. Yeah, we appreciated having you. Students, we are going to move into a 5-minute break. So if you could be back here by 12:28 Phoenix time, stretch, jump around, do what you got to do to be awake, and we'll come back to demonstrate. Oh, sorry, make sure that you get your air quality sensors while you are on your break. I'll put it in Slack too. Are you gonna stay on, Josie, or are you gonna head out?
Oh, I can stay on. I had scheduled this until 1 and I didn't really know what we were planning. So I'll take a 5-minute break and I'll be back to listen in. Maybe I'll ask some questions. I could probably answer some questions for you though.
Josephine, can I ask you something else?
Yes.
So when you were talking about COVID, so would you say like environmental actually dealt with COVID? Not like dealt with it, but like you've actually like you said the surfaces. So like has the environmental like looked into COVID and seeing like what that does? Like how
the the research shows that surface transmission doesn't really happen. And what's happening is that people are breathing or inhaling live viral particles from the air. So like you're not, touching a surface and then touching your nose or mouth and getting COVID that way. The only way people seem to be getting it is inhaling it, just sitting there breathing. And it looks like also that it tends to sort of attach to particles. So if there's more particulate matter in the air, then it's more likely to be transmitted than if there's less. So that's why it's okay to go outside where the particles are kind of flowing through the air. Because when you come inside, they're kind of just sitting in the spot, right? But outside, all of the air particles are kind of moving along, and that's mostly just because the Earth is rotating, turning around. That's a whole different thing. But so that's why it's safe to go outside without a mask on. Then in there, if there's other people, the particles just don't get a chance to gather in enough quantity to attach to somebody's lungs.
So did the environmental agency find that out themselves, or did you have help with doctors and stuff?
Oh no, that was a worldwide. There's been actually a tremendous, there's an entire research database that doctors are using, and you can go in there and read not just their findings, but you can actually access their data as it's updated, and they're carefully tracking the genetic structure and how the mutations are happening, such as they're reported in the news as variants. And it's really important to be aware that the variants change the nature of the illness and the incubation time and the severity of the illness. And it looks like the variants, like there's a Delta variant that is more contagious and has more severe health effects than the first coronavirus structure, and then the first variant were pretty bad and deadly, but mostly in elderly people or people with who already have respiratory illnesses. And this new variant is causing people to become ill who don't have those things. So it's affecting healthier people. And this is just what it's just it's a humongous global effort. Doctors all over the planet are working on it. And there are a couple of websites where you can go and read their findings, and they're very reputable and they're highly censored. So there's some places where you can be certain that the information that they're reporting are facts. And it's also important to understand that since it is a new illness to people, that there's no way to know exactly what's going to happen, since it'll take several years for the virus to rotate around the planet and throughout different human populations, that it'll take some time to know the long-term effects of COVID.
Oh, okay. I also have another question. You said the first two variants of COVID. So what is the very first? What is it, SARS? Is that, because I know they said something about SARS and COVID being connected. And then I'll go ahead. I saw you ready to speak.
Yeah, they're okay, so there's SARS-1 and SARS, there are uncountable numbers of these. these kind of.
Real quick. So there is SARS-CoV-1, and that was already dealt with in the past, and it was a lot more deadly compared to the SARS-CoV-2 that we're dealing with now, which is a lot more, I guess, contagious or like able to be spread around. And so the thing is that with SARS-CoV-2 is the one with the different variants that we're dealing with now. And so SARS-CoV-2, it's kind of like the main structure hasn't really changed, which is why like the vaccines are still effective against it because of the antibodies that we make that attach to their antigens and everything. And so I would say it's highly mutatable because it's an RNA virus. And kind of like how, I'm sorry, but how RNA viruses don't, just in general, RNA viruses go through a lot of mutations because there's not really that, I guess like that coding sequence that kind of checks to see if they're the same, kind of like a DNA, I guess. I don't know, there's just like not as many checkpoints for an RNA virus. So that's why it's very mutatable, I guess you can say. I don't know.
So what I think what you're trying to describe is why the vaccines work. In the vaccines, what they do is you get the vaccine and it has a section of the, it's called recombinant nucleic acids. And so it has a section of that. And when your body sees that nucleic acid and doesn't recognize it, it just makes a piece of the puzzle for it so that when you get the actual live virus, then that automatically, your body will just automatically manufacture an antigen for that section of the virus. So that's why you don't actually get COVID when you get the vaccine. And oh, we could go on and on. I am not an expert, but I have had to do quite a bit of work on air quality, especially surrounding COVID. And it's obvious that indoor air quality is now the new emergency air quality parameter, and just making sure that you have healthy indoor air, such as opening your windows, making sure that you get some fresh air and airflow going into your home, and making sure that you have some fans going, especially if somebody's sick, and that you aren't sharing the same air day and night all winter. Things like that are really important factors in preventing the spread of COVID.
Opening windows because outside air is better than shut in inside air.
Yeah, you have to let the particles out. They don't have a really long life. They don't stay in the air for a long time. But if you're close to each other and you're breathing each other's vapors, lung vapor, then you're probably gonna. You're just gonna get it. There's no way around that. But you can open up the windows, blow the fans around.
So
really listen to health professionals.
Yes, definitely. So sorry to interrupt. So students, our break, we've had a little bit of a longer break. So if you can start coming back on, putting your cameras on. And so I think a lot of what Natalia was gonna talk about in her presentation, we covered already. So as to not duplicate, I wanna go into what you all did for your science portion of the air quality test. So on Monday, you all set up your air quality sensors with that paper plate that had the layer of Vaseline in order to catch any particulate matter in the air in your home and also outside. And so I hope you had the opportunity to grab those sensors. And I wanted to hear back from you all on what you observed. And so the questions that Natalia had outlined include, did you see any changes from day 1 to now? And I'll put that in the chat. Do you see any changes from day 1 to now? So maybe you took pictures on your iPad from the first day. And then since I think it's been out for at least 48 hours, since it is Wednesday, you can even think of any changes you saw from day 2 until now, or not day 2, maybe 12 hours, 24 hours. So Jaren said his mom trashed the plate. Well, what do you think that you would have seen? Let's see if you can make a guess on what you would have seen on the plate. Do you have any pets, Jaren? Jaren, do you have any pets? Oh, are you putting it in the chat? I wasn't sure if you were gonna unmute yourself.
And I think most people also had kind of a plate inside and a plate outside. So folks can kind of reflect on what you saw on either one of those. Sounds like some people kind of had the weather elements that were kind of impacting outdoor plates.
The wind from my storm took my plate. Understandable. Got rained on.
Somebody put, or I think I put in here that I was needing a plate to eat on. Just kidding.
Put some pizza on your plate. So who has their plate in good condition that can share? Kiara has a plate. And so Kiara, what can you share about your sensors?
It has some cat hair on it. And then I also burned candles, like scented candles in my room, which is where my plate was, but I don't see any major particles from that. Just cat hair.
Just cat hair. I see that Taylor said that hers is a bit dusty from blowing away in the wind. Can you show yours on the camera if it will show up?
I don't know if you can see it, but there's like one part on the plate that's kind of like brownish from being constantly blown away. But I kind of dusted it off and stuff, so this is just how it looks now.
I see it. So you must have got a lot of particulate matter. So a question to you, do you think this is particulate matter that's like 2.5 or greater than 2.5?
I'd probably say greater than 2.5 because when I put this out, it was a bit hazy outside. So I feel like that's one of the main reasons probably why it's like this.
That's true. And right, the particulate matter that's 2.5 is really, really small. So if you can see it, then it's probably greater than 2.5. So good answer. Tennille said she taped her clothesline. Sorry, did I interrupt somebody? Go ahead. Go ahead, Callista.
Okay, so this one was outside. Ew, there's a whole bunch of insects in them, but it's fine. It looks okay.
What kind of bugs did you catch?
Ew, they're small little ones. They ate into the plate in the Vaseline, so they're kind of stuck way at the bottom. You can't really see them, but I duct taped mine to the wall, so yeah. And then there's this one that's from inside that just has a whole bunch of dust particles in it. So
that's good. I didn't expect to have the bugs. Josephine, are bugs considered particulate matter if you're there? She might have stepped away for a moment. We'll ask. Did anyone else get bugs on theirs?
I think they're too big. They're yeah. They're considered insects. Yeah, maybe you might be able to find pieces of larvae, which would be bug eggs.
Darren said the plate I kept outside became dusty and some water because it rained. And then I think I might have missed some other responses. A lot of people's flew away. Darren's guess was if he would have had kept the plate didn't get thrown away, there would have been some debris. Yanaba, the plate inside only had one strand of cat hair, but the one outside had nothing. And that's to be expected because the rain in Illinois has kept everything settled and wet. Yep, that's a good point. And I think in terms of like particulate matter for Tucson, it doesn't rain too much here. And so when I was back at home in Window Rock area, I didn't really have allergies. And then I moved here. And I think because it doesn't rain, a lot of that pollen and stuff stays into the air. And if it would rain, it would get put down, just as Yanaba pointed out. And so I definitely have seen a change in my allergies here because of the particulate matter that's in the air. Let's see what else.
Carol, I was going to mention that sometimes, I feel like sometimes in our house, like if you've got kind of things pretty closed off, but you've got like a stream of light kind of coming in from outside, then sometimes you can also see kind of just whether there's like a lot of dust in the house or something, because you can see kind of in that stream of light, you can kind of, it highlights some of the particles in the air as well. It's just something, another kind of, sometimes you see that or in another indicator, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can even leave it out longer if you wanted to continue the experiment, because this is just at like time 48. I'm not sure what time it got put out, but probably about 48 hours. And I'm sure if you left the sensor out there longer, it would have more time to collect more particles. Michaela said outside, it collected dust, even got a mosquito, and then the plate kind of got soggy from the rain. Inside just collected some cat fur. And then Caitlin said the plate inside didn't get any changes. And then there wasn't an outside plate put down. All right, next question. Which plate has the most particles, inside or outside? And so the third question she asked, sort of you all answered already, is did weather conditions skew the results? So I see a response from outside. Outside had more things sticking to the plate. And that makes sense, right? There's more wind and things moving around outside.
So Carol, just as as we kind of think about kind of reflecting back on the water quality experiment and this air quality experiment, this is kind of where it's really important for us to kind of take note, right? Was there a dust storm on that day? What was the weather like? Was it raining outside? So those are all kind of things that are kind of having an impact on the results of our findings. And we talked about just, and this is something that's very kind of common, right? Within science is just that importance of having to kind of make observations and then write those down to see how that might impact you. So that if somebody else tried to replicate your study, which is oftentimes what science likes to do, is try to replicate those results, that maybe they would want to ensure that they're in a similar kind of weather pattern when they're doing their experiments than if I'm doing my experiment during monsoons and Carol decides to replicate that during a time when there's no rain at all. We might see just vast differences there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely take a lot of good notes and have the composition books ready. And I think Natalia walked you through how to take some good lab notes on Monday when you all were doing the water quality demonstration. Again, this can be used for your air quality sensors as well to take some notes of the different samples and times. And so I think that for most people, they said that the weather conditions skew results. So skew meaning that it like changed your results in some way. And so definitely for some of you, you weren't even able to collect the data because it got blown away or thrown away. So yeah, it definitely skewed results. And then, did anyone have any plates that had more particles inside than outside? Anybody? No? Yeah, we don't have too much wind and weather and stuff outside, so that makes sense. I just wanted to know. Oh, Yanaba said yes. Why do you think that was?
I think because I mean I have 2 cats in my house, and so there's a lot. And then also we recently just renovated our house, so we still have like construction going on, so definitely a lot of that. But it was more than outside because it rained all last week, and I thought I was gonna see corn pollen on mine just because I live out in the country and I'm surrounded by corn on all sides of my house. But when I went to go collect corn pollen last night, even it wouldn't come off the stalks because it was wet. So nothing came on my plate from outside.
That makes sense because of the weather, huh? That's cool. Great observations.
Yes, that is an excellent observation. I commend you on that. And that is actually one of the properties of particulate matter. When it rains, it tends to pull all of those particles. It just washes them down to ground level so that they have to dry out and start all over again to become suspended in the air.
And Carol, while this was kind of a simple exercise, I'll just kind of take the moment, of course, to say that like, as we're thinking about kind of our research projects, a lot of what we also kind of consider in those research projects is like, what might we do differently if we were to kind of try this experiment again? And so for those of you that kind of lost the paper plates in the wind, it might be that you kind of would design some other method, right, to kind of keep that paper plate there so that you're able to kind of collect that data. But yeah, just to kind of tie it back to things that we might think about as we're creating those research experiments.
Yes, you could duct tape it to the wall, like, or duct tape it to your line. Like, I think it was, who said that Callista, I think she said she put it on the wall. And then Tennille said that she put it on her clothesline outside. So yeah, some suggestions. You could use a clothespin. I'm gonna share my screen because again, Rudy said that this was just one example of how people can take air quality information. Sorry, I thought I had it opened to the right slide. I'm going back. So some more technical tools that can be used for air quality monitoring, as Josie said before, is the purple air sensor. And so there are purple air sensors around the world. And this is just a snapshot of a couple that are in the Southwest. And so there are there's one close to Gallup. I think that might be Windrock, the one that says 61 right here. And then I'll use annotate. So right here, and then I'm gonna choose a different color because it doesn't come up as well. For those in Flagstaff, there's the air quality sensor there. And you'll also notice that with the designation of the colors, thinking back to Josie's presentation about the different levels of air quality and what those colors mean. So green means good, right? And if it's really dark maroon, then that's when it's really bad and asphyxiation can happen. And so unfortunately, there are some wildfires that are happening across the nation, one in Arizona. And so what would you suspect if we were to check the air quality sensors in those areas? What colors do you think that they would be? You can put it in the chat or unmute yourself. Do you think it would be green? Do you think it'd be green?
Cole said red.
Yes, red.
Tennille said red. Cole said or orange. Red.
Yeah, because things are burning, it's putting that soot and other things into the air. So thinking back to what Josie said about that laser, I don't think that it would be able to just shoot straight through the air. It would have a lot of diffraction, and so it would pick up a lot of particulate matter and therefore be red. So very, very good. I'm going to stop doing annotate. So those are just some examples of where air quality sensors are. And so if you're thinking of doing this for your geoscience project, there's data that can be taken from a lot of different places to compare, as seen here from these sensors. And this is data from Natalia's, oops, I was going to try to delete the annotate, but just leave them there. This is data from Natalia's air quality sensor. And so it has different designations for temperature, particulate matter, sizes, so on and so forth. And so she can do, instead of doing maybe comparisons, because that's one aspect, you can do comparisons from different places. She might do a time difference, compare particulate matter at different times throughout the day. She could say, okay, I'm going to compare it during monsoon season versus when it's dry and more windy. You know, that's information she can take from that purple air sensor that she has at her house. And so another tool that can be used in addition to the purple sensor is the purple air sensor is this wind tracker. And it's really small. It's something that can be clipped on you, carried with you to be able to track real-time data. And you can put it on your backpack. And so it uses Bluetooth and can actually connect to your phone. And so there are also sensors that other people use because other people have these sensors, and therefore it uploads their data to this system. And so you can also make comparisons in the same way with that purple air sensor. And we're thankful to the ITEP team because they actually purchased some of these sensors for our students last year to be able to complete an air quality geoscience project. And so if you're thinking of doing air quality, instead of doing water, or you could do both, get super creative, but this is a tool that can be used for that air quality project. And so here's a couple of the data that is used, that's used for the wind sensor. So in the same way that you can export data from the purple air, you can do the same for wind to be able to make really cool graphs and do some comparisons for your projects. And so let's see. I'm gonna stop screen sharing. And let's see, for the sake of this presentation, I'm gonna pull up another screen, 1 second. So this is the Purple Air website. And so you'll see all the ones that are here in Tucson, right? I think Natalia is like, this is the one that's by my house. And so the air quality is pretty good over where she's at right now. It's in the green. It's considered satisfactory, poses little to no risk. And again, you can also take information from different times of the day. So I'm sure that in the morning, when everyone's sleeping, there's no cars out, the air quality is usually pretty good. But once people start commuting to work and whatnot, you'll probably see it shift a little bit more towards having more particulate matter into the air. This is just in Tucson. Let's see, I know that we have a couple folks all the way in, let's look in Oregon. Oh, it's taking a little bit to download, so maybe I won't be able to do that. So let's look over here in California, actually. And so there's one that's looking a little bit red here to me. So members of sensitive groups may experience health effects if they are exposed for 24 hours. the general public is not likely to be affected. And so sensitive groups could include people like with asthma or younger kids or older elders. So that's something to think about. Maybe they want to wear a mask. Masks are useful not just to protect against COVID, which is particulate matter, but also soot and other particulate matter. And so I'm not sure where the fires are right now in the community. I thought that maybe I'd see some for Arizona because I know that there's a wildfire happening near there or near us. Maybe it just takes a second to load. I'm not seeing it, but a great tip that Natalia mentioned is you can look at the NASA satellite website, because there are some fires that you can see from the satellite images that are being brought. And so you can compare those and then therefore look at the longitudinal or maybe even city locations for some of those fires that are being seen from the satellites in order to pinpoint some of those things. So I think up here is probably where we're seeing more maybe fires here. This is like in the deeper maroon area. So this is in Oregon. So it's at 266. So health alert, everyone may experience more serious health effects if they are exposed for 24 hours. So I'm assuming that this may be a place that's experiencing a wildfire, but again, I'm not quite sure. I'm just looking and making some conclusions based off of what's here. It is closer to Oregon, so I don't know if Zeta knows. It looks like it's close to someplace Falls.
Klamath Falls.
Is that where a fire is happening? Klamath Falls?
Oh, I don't know if there's a fire there. I just know that's Klamath Falls.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't read it because of the dots. Thanks. So yeah, just wanted to demonstrate to you all how your water or your air quality sensors connect to the broader sense of air quality, and then some more technical tools that can be used to monitor air quality as well. We all have lungs to breathe, and so regardless of if you're interested in air quality or not, it's important to know how it impacts our health overall and how we can safeguard our communities and pets even, and other people, other living beings that we care about. So any questions?
I looked it up. That's the biggest fire in the country right now. It's at 200,000 acres.
Wow.
Going.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so that those results definitely make sense. I would think that if it was the biggest wildfire, and I don't know if how much, like if there's grains of salt that you take with that data, but I would expect like, oh, I thought it would be in like the 500 range in terms of the index. But it's outside, so maybe
That's what it seems like. Yeah, I agree.
But maybe if there's an air quality sensor there, and if it's like in the heart of the fire where that information and data would be collected, it probably would have burned up. So how accurate would we have something in the 500 range with a fire around it?
Yeah, maybe all the trees already burned down.
Mm-hmm. True. Josie, are there any last thoughts before we go into our assignments for today?
No, I just want to commend this class of 11th and 12th graders for your participation and for showing up and paying attention, and encourage you to continue to think critically and have some whatever you're interested in, just try to keep on learning and growing. And I want you to know that you are important and valuable people. And that's it.
Wow, thank you. That's important to hear. I feel like we don't hear it enough. But thank you.
Oh, let me say it again. You are important and valuable people, and I really enjoyed being able to present to you today.
Thank you. One more
Thank you.
time. You are important and valuable people. Thank you so much, Josie.
Yes, yes.
All right.
All
We hope
right.
you have a good rest of the day, okay?
Okay, you too.
All right, students. So we have finished out our, ooh, I'm losing track of the days. I think it's the 8th day of NASEP. We learned a lot about what Native people can do for academia and why we're important, and ways that our knowledge systems can impact not only academia, but the world and the community. And in addition to discussing air quality, its importance to our health and well-being as well, and its connection to the geoscience projects. And again, just that hands-on activity where you all shared out what your results were for the air quality sensors was really cool. So thank you for doing the activity and sharing out. I'm gonna share everything with Natalia, and I'm sure she'll be really happy to hear that you all shared out about the activity and were engaged with it. So I just want to cover what the reflection video assignment is. In the first session, Dr. Charles talked about his connection to these different funding sources and how he was able to secure a grant that was then used to purchase items that benefit you all and will also be used for other things that support the NASEP program and our students. And so part of receiving that funding is having students share out about their experience. So that's why we're asking you all to have these daily reflections to share about what you're learning. And one component of what this will include is this reflection video. And so talking about how the program has impacted you, what you've learned, what your favorite part has been, maybe how it'll impact your future careers in STEM. That's going to be very important, not only to enriching our program, but it also helps us secure grant funding as well. So it's really important, in addition to those things, not only teaching us about how we can do better as a program, but it also is going to be used for our closing recognition ceremony happening on Friday. So to make sure that the closing runs smoothly, I'm going to take these reflection videos, which should be 1 to 2 minutes, and just stitch them together so that it plays seamlessly, because as you've seen, I'm not very good at switching between presentations. And so if I were to do that for all of your presentations, it would take a lot of time. So therefore, we're asking that you do these reflection videos tonight and send them to me so that I can begin stitching them together so that the closing goes smoothly, it doesn't go over time, which I'm sure you all would appreciate as well. So I'll send out the directions for the reflection video, but just to give a broad overview now, you can record it on your iPads, on your phone. You can put this virtual background that Rudy created for everyone as your background to record. If you do it on Zoom, you can send me the link. There's different options that we can support you in creating a great reflection video. But what you're going to want to do is record it and then send it to me. And then you also have your daily reflections on just thinking about what the content we've learned today, and also sharing feedback to presenters because they do ask for that feedback and is important to them. Tomorrow, we will be having another activity from Raytheon. So you're going to be needing that packet of materials that we mailed to you all, which includes like scissors, paper, glue, all those things. And so have that ready for tomorrow. But they also want you to watch this video link that they've sent to us. And then as something fun, we did create that NASEP playlist, and we seem to have a little bit of a theme of music for today's content. And so if you can at least add one song to the NASEP playlist that you enjoy, that gets you pumped up, inspires you, something that gets you going. So that's that. And then Rudy, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, no, I think that that's it for right now.
Great. So I'll make sure to email these out and also post them in Slack. I see something in the chat. Yes, could you put the playlist link in the chat? Oops, sorry, I was trying to click into the presentation so I could copy the link and I changed. So here is the playlist. And I think it'll be really interesting because so many of us had different music tastes. But that's the link. Any other questions? Any other questions? I'm opening up gallery view. So can I get the thumbs up emoji if everyone understands?
Cole had a question about platform. Cole, was that having to do with the
Oh
recording
no,
of the video?
that was something else.
Sorry.
Okay. I see a lot of thumbs up. Great. And so we will be having, is it Wednesday? Yeah, Wednesday we'll be having the watch party for anyone that's interested. In Slack, I'm going to put recommendations for, not recommendations, but a post to have people vote on the time for the movie night. Does we end at 1 most days? And so is 4 too early? Is 4 too early for people? 4 p.m. Is that too early? Yes, I'm seeing some head nods. 5 p.m. Is that too early? 5 p.m. Phoenix time. And so the people who are in the northern region, it would be 6 p.m. their time. So is 5 p.m. good for a movie? It's going to be super late for Yanaba. It's probably going to be like 8. So 5 p.m. And then I'll put some suggestions for the movie that we'll watch in Slack so that we can vote. Black Widow did just come out. So if you haven't seen that yet, maybe we could watch that. But again, I'll post that in Slack for people to take a vote for what we'll watch at 5 tomorrow. So I'll send out the recording with the instructions on how to do the video and the assignments. So if there's no questions, have a good evening. We'll stay on if there are people who have questions. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Good job.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.